Today I had the honor of interviewing Congressman Joseph P. Kennedy III. Congressman Kennedy is a U.S. representative from Massachusetts' 4th Congressional District since 2013. He is the son of Joseph Kennedy II and the grandson of Senator and former Attorney General Bobby Kennedy. Congressman Joe Kennedy gave the formal response to Donald Trump's State of the Union address. In my interview with him, we talk about everything from his Uncle Chris running for governor of Illinois to discussing future plans to run for president. It was a great conversation. Congressman Kennedy, thank you so much for agreeing to sit down for this interview. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be with you, Jay.
You too. You've been in congressional office since 2013. As of now, overall, would you say you're enjoying it?
Yeah, I am. Some parts are better than others. But look, it's an extraordinary honor to be able to represent the people of Massachusetts in Congress. I'm one of 9 Congress members there. It's a demanding job. It takes an awful lot of effort out of me and out of my family. But to be able to be the voice of about 750,000 people and the policies down in Washington is it's an honor and it's a thrill.
So you gave the formal response to Donald Trump's State of the Union address, and I thought it was really good. How was it asked to be given the formal response to the State of the Union address?
So it's a great question, and I don't actually really know how that came about. We were down in Washington about the week before in the midst of this kind of short-lived government shutdown. And I believe it was Sunday when we were, it was either Sunday or Monday, we were in a caucus meeting, and Leader Pelosi mentioned to me, she said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something, but later." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." Didn't really give it a whole lot of thought. Then later that evening, we were voting, and she said, she came up to me again and said, "I need to speak with you." And I said, "Okay, what's going on?" She said, "Well, not here." And we walked off the House floor, and we kept going into her office, and she kicked out all of her staff. And so I started to get a little nervous at that point that I might be in trouble or something. She extended this extraordinary invitation and honor, and I obviously was thrilled to be able to be offered and to be asked. And so I said yes right away. It's a tough spot. I'd seen a lot of really gifted politicians be in a position of trying to respond to the president. And whether you're a fan or not of whoever the president is, it's awfully hard to meet the moment of a State of the Union with the environment and the pomp and circumstance in the House chamber. So I knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge, but still thrilled to try to give it a shot and see if we could do it well.
And you represent kind of the younger wave of Democrats, being that you're 37. How do you think younger people can effectively get involved in politics and leadership?
There isn't any debate at this point about whether young people can get involved. We have to. If you look out over the challenges our country is facing today, whether that's issues for our planet and climate change, whether it's fiscal issues with a $20 trillion debt and a tax cut that was just passed, that is something that, my friend, you and I are going to be paying for. Whether it's a lack of infrastructure, lead in our drinking water, guns tearing apart our schools, our churches, our concerts, the challenges that is being left to a younger generation at this point are begging for our response. And you've actually seen in the last couple of days this extraordinary response from these high school students in Florida that have said, we're not going to accept the platitudes that elected officials, that adults, the folks that are supposed to be caring for our children and nurturing them and providing them a pathway to success, to raise their own families and to grow into a vibrant economy and a nation that we can be proud of. They're not going to accept our excuses any longer. And to see that response, to immediately change the debate on one critical issue in our country on guns, I think is sending ripples across a whole wide variety of communities and issues out there. So we need to step up. Millennials, by definition, folks that are old enough to vote, 18 to 34, thereabouts, they are the largest generation in American history. They will decide the outcome of these next elections, no question. It's a question as to whether they vote or not. If they vote, they will decide it. If they don't, they will also decide it.
How do you think, having effective leadership and getting your message out to the people that you serve, how can you do that with all this so-called fake news and Twitter and social media? Does that help or does that make it worse?
Both. So look, it's on the one hand, you've seen as we call it, a democratization of information, right? Anybody at the moment is a reporter. You can all of a sudden, with social media, with Twitter and Facebook, take videos and photographs and messages and put them up online for literally millions of people to see. The challenge is there's also no vetting process as to what's actually true and what's not. And that's been this big challenge with this fake news phenomenon. That provides an extraordinary opportunity for elected officials, people running for office or just any type of civic leader, professional athletes, others, to be able to communicate with a broad following. But it means with that, I would argue, comes a responsibility to do so with the obligation that what you say, that words still matter and words count. And we have to, I think, get back to that recognition that people do listen to what leaders in society say. And I think there should be a responsibility that all of us have, elected official or otherwise, have with the way that we use those social media accounts and the way that we choose to interact with the public.
Mm-hmm. So when the Republicans wanted to repeal the Affordable Care Act, you spoke very passionately out in front of Congress on the virtue of mercy. How does a person in public office exhibit mercy effectively?
It's a great question. I'm not sure anybody, well, I'm not sure I'm certainly qualified to say it. I think what I was responding to in that speech was an effort by Republican leadership to strip, by varying accounts, 20 to 30 million people from healthcare. And the Speaker of the House termed that an act of mercy. And taking healthcare from millions of Americans is not merciful. Forcing people to have to go through these heartbreaking decisions that no person, let alone no American, should have to go through, choosing to be at your job or by your loved one's side when they need you, isn't a choice that, one, we as a society have to put on the shoulders of our people, and two, that the richest, most powerful country in the world and in the course of human history just shouldn't. And I think the frustrating part about this debate from my perspective is, look, healthcare is something that most people don't think about until you really need it, in which case it's the only thing people think about. And it is unique in our circumstances because there's a whole lot of government programs and a whole lot of things in our society that some folks might not need. Healthcare is something we're all going to need at some point, whether you're welcoming a new child into this world or watching a loved one pass out of it. And we all pay into it, whether you like it or not. What comes with that then is, I believe, a collective responsibility to try to make that system work and work effectively and efficiently. And what we saw through those healthcare repeals was a callous effort to strip it away and to try to, from millions of Americans, and try to call that mercy or effective government, and it's just not the case. I do take heart from the fact that there were millions of people across the country that stood up and said, no, you can't do that. And because they did, Republicans failed. But it doesn't mean they stopped. And so we got to stay vigilant on it and keep our voices up.
So now let's transition over to your Uncle Chris, who you just endorsed literally minutes ago, and have been doing so for the past couple months. So what leadership qualities do you see in Chris that will help him make Illinois a better state?
Look, Chris is going to be a great governor for the state of Illinois. I know that because I know Chris. I know his character, I know his integrity, I know his commitment. He's been extremely successful at everything he does, whether that was as a business executive in Illinois, whether it's as one of the leaders of Top Box and a program to try to eradicate hunger in some of our food deserts and in some of the poorest communities around Chicago and around Illinois, whether that was the head of the leadership position at the University of Illinois system, whether it's leading the charge on our property tax system and the impact that property tax system has, particularly on schools and the education that a next generation needs in order to succeed, particularly in an increasingly competitive world. So he's got the resume to do it. He's got the commitment to that. He's run all over the state like crazy over the course of the past year, literally in every corner, making his voice heard and speaking out on values that have driven this campaign. What I also know about Chris is the kind of person he is because he's my uncle. And whenever our family has needed Chris, he shows up. He shows up without asking a question. He shows up because he's needed. And I think when you look at the type of leadership that not just Illinois needs, but our country needs, at this time, it's somebody that is going to dedicate themselves 100% to the challenges we face and find ways to pull people together. A compassion and empathy, but an understanding that we got to make these systems work, but they have to have a human touch. Chris is that person, and he's going to make a great governor.
So the Kennedy family has also had a long relationship dating back literally 50 years with Dr. Martin Luther King and the African-American community. How can Chris, as governor of Illinois, help expand the strong alliance and friendship with the African-American community?
Look, I think what Chris stands for more than anything is an opportunity for everybody. And it's trying to make sure our government structures recognize that still in our society, while we've made extraordinary progress over the course of our history, we still fall short, and that there's various structures that are put in place, codified in our laws, that still result in a lack of economic opportunity, a lack of economic mobility. And Chris has dedicated himself to that over the course of this campaign, particularly pointing to the challenges inherent in that property tax system in Illinois. And so I think what you've seen is a courage from him to be able to take on that issue, to elevate it, to make it one of the primary issues that are being addressed by the candidates, and to say that if we're serious about making this commitment to each other, we actually got to address the way that this system particularly funds our schools.
Your grandfather and Chris Kennedy's father, Bobby Kennedy, and civil rights activist Cesar Chavez bonded over their commitment to social justice. Right now, there's a big kind of war on immigration. What can an Illinois governor do to help push the laws of immigration that they might have in place and fair immigration laws in order to benefit the Hispanic community?
Look, an awful lot. And let's be clear, this isn't just an immigration issue, isn't just a question as to how these laws affect a various immigrant population. Our family story is an immigrant story. And I think what I always find so hard to reconcile when we talk about immigration in this country is that the vast majority of the folks talking about it, if the laws were when their families immigrated here, or what they are today, their families wouldn't have been allowed to be here either. This often gets framed as a Hispanic or Latino issue. There are dozens and dozens of other nationalities that are here that this affects as well, and it has particularly impact on Ireland and those with those Irish immigrants that are here that can't go home to visit a loved one who's sick or visit their parents when their families fall in trying times or even funerals. And so this is an issue. It's a moral issue. It's an economic issue because clearly if we address this issue, every study has shown that there'll be an economic boon for our community. There's ways, and this is I think what's so frustrating at the federal level at the moment, where we can make the investments we need in order to secure our border, to modernize our immigration system, while also recognizing that there's millions of people that become fabric of our community. So we're not just going to start uprooting and separating Americans here and American families as we try to enforce outdated immigration laws. And so having leadership from a governor's office that is going to stand on those principles, using the platform that comes with the governor's office, engaging with local community groups, law enforcement, trying to engage and if necessary, push back on federal officials to say, look, this is what this means when we start talking about separating dreamers from their families. Dreamers, kids that were brought here when they were small children from parents who ended up either overstaying their visas or not coming here with the proper documentation. Some of them have little siblings that are American citizens. You're really going to start stripping American families apart? Yeah. We think that that's a moral way to address that problem, particularly when my family came here in a similar circumstance, fleeing oppression and poverty. Come on.
Right. So Chris, as he's said numerous times, he's running a campaign against the political establishment. He's also running as what he calls unbossed and unbought. What does this mean to the voters in Illinois, and is this important?
I think it's really important because what you're going to get is authentic Chris Kennedy. And what you're going to get is somebody that has made clear what his values and vision are for the state of Illinois. And that will throw himself 100% behind it. And that he will be able to do what's right for the voters that send him there and not some of the perhaps traditional political constituencies that end up pushing an election one way or the other. Having that type of independent voice and independent mind, independent thinking, I think is exactly what we need in our political system today.
And for those who are undecided on who to vote for the Illinois gubernatorial race, is there anything that you could say to convince those individuals that Chris Kennedy is the right choice for governor?
Chris Kennedy is the right choice for governor, the first one. Look, Chris is my uncle, so obviously I'm going to support him. But I'm here supporting him for more reasons than that. I'm supporting him because I truly believe that he's got the character, the integrity, the background, the experience, the acumen, the values, the vision that any state in our nation needs. And Illinois is lucky to be able to have him here and have somebody like Chris that is willing to put himself out there, go through the rigors of a campaign, and do everything he can to try to serve the people of Illinois. So I hope people will take a good look at his record, the way that he's run a campaign, what he has done, his record of success. And I think that when they do that, and they get to know the Chris that I know, I think it makes it an easy choice.
So earlier you mentioned the recent Florida shooting. Obviously it was a tragic event. There's been a lot of gun violence in not only Chicago, but also Illinois and just everywhere throughout the country. As a member of Congress, what is your stance on gun violence and the way that guns are distributed?
Congress's inaction on gun violence measures has been, without question, the most inexplicable, inexcusable, and heartbreaking aspect of my tenure in Congress. We have offered thoughts and prayers, I don't know how many times since I've been there, and clearly thoughts and prayers don't work. We have the ability in the halls of Congress to change the laws, to address some of these issues, everything from the ways that guns are sold privately to gun show loophole to looking at what types of restrictions or classifications should be put on some of these extremely dangerous weapons, including even an assault weapons ban, to issues around bump stocks, which was an accessory that ended up essentially converting a weapon from a semi-automatic to an automatic one that was used in Las Vegas that injured over 800 people, nearly 800 people. We can do this. Congress has chosen not to. And Congress has chosen to say that we don't have it in us to actually solve that problem. That's just wrong. We do. We have a political inability because of Republican leadership in Congress's refusal to actually address this in any meaningful way, in any way, period. We can't get a vote on anything. But because of their refusal to even allow a vote, a bill on the floor, Jay, it's hard to see these headlines yet again and to watch the Congress of the United States do nothing.
Right. Before we end, I just want to point out that there's been a lot of speculation from the media that you might run for president. Is it possible that you might even consider running for president in the future?
I have absolutely no plans to run for president. I've got a 2-year-old and an 8-week-old. The big question for me is, am I going to sleep tonight? And I hope the answer to that is yes. Other than that, I'm not really focused on much.
Congressman Kennedy, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, pal.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.